And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon on the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, while 500 cars took over the city of Oakland in a sideshow this weekend, Oakland's Mayor Barbara Lee went to Minneapolis to talk to the DNC and tell them how great Oakland is.
I want to take a moment to first bring you greetings from Oakland, California. Oakland is in the house. Now,
They didn't even get one woo.
Can you blame them?
Now, Oakland is a community that fights for democracy every day.
Fights for a lot of other things, too.
You know, she would do herself a favor if she listened to the Crime Blotter.
She also made this pitch to the people at the DNC in Minneapolis.
We are resilient, we're diverse, and we're unstoppable. So visit Oakland and you will see. Okay? I really want you to come.
On that, we're in agreement. I would love to see all of the grand poobahs in the Democratic Party spend their vacations in Oakland.
I said, hell no, baby boy. Let me get up on out of here.
I think they'd have a very, very, very good and safe time.
Oh, my God. They melted the basketball court.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the state senator representing Orange County, specifically Huntington Beach, in the California State Legislature. You can get him online at Senator Strickland CA on X, and you can get him on the web at stricklandforsenate.com. Senator Tony Strickland, welcome.
John, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. And there was a fascinating piece about redistricting here in California that dropped in Politico last night, where they went through and they told the story as to how we got from talking about the potential of redistricting to putting an initiative on the ballot that voters will be voting on this November. And according to reporting from Politico, this all started out as Gavin Newsom posturing. This was supposed to be them saying, all right, this is a potential, but we're not actually going to do it. This is just something that we're going to put out there to try to prevent Texas from changing their lines and other states from changing their lines. And it was never intended to actually happen. But after they came up with this idea to just put out there, Gavin Newsom traveled around the country and was a guest on all of these podcasts where he decided he would transition from being the Democrat who can talk to Republicans. And he introduced us to that character on his podcast when he had people like Charlie Kirk on and Michael Savage and Stephen Bannon and others. And now he's the chest-beating partisan who is going to fight Donald Trump on everything. And he would go on these podcasts and he would talk about this redistricting in California in such stark terms that they were just too far gone. And Nancy Pelosi came back and said, listen, here's the deal. We now have to follow through with this because we're out there so far. And the Democrats had zero intention of ever actually doing this. But Gavin Newsom and his big mouth forced them to a place to where they actually had to do it. They then went to their numbers guy. They then went to Paul Mitchell, who's the guy that they hire to consult with them on the redrawing of the lines. He apparently told them not to do it. And then they came back to him and said, do it anyway. And he had to come up with all of these new districts with a very short period of time. This is something that they normally take years and years and years of painstaking meetings and going over maps and going over districts and going over lines. He had to throw this together with no time at all. And now they're stuck supporting this thing where it looks like they might be over $100 million on the no side to try to defeat them at the ballot box. The California delegation didn't want it. They don't want new districts. They don't want new constituents. They don't want to have to change everything they're doing midway through the decade. But now they're stuck. What do you make of that piece in Politico?
Well, a lot of the brethren that I talked to in the legislature, it almost seems like the ends justify the means. And instead of articulating their priorities, their proposals at the election that we have in November, they're going to a place right now where they want to have predetermined elections in California and no competition whatsoever. What we have here in California is the gold standard. They draw lines in public. It's in our Constitution that we have this nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission. They do hearings throughout the state of California, every corner of California. And they also, in the Constitution, say they're going to try to keep cities and counties together as much as possible. What transpired on these maps, and I will have to say they were very innovative on drawing these maps, but they split counties 16 times, cities more than 100 times, and they're trying to mislead and pretty much lie to the voters, saying that they're going to keep the Nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission through the title of this. And as you know, John, the Attorney General does the title. And the title is going to say, keep the Nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission, when the very fact of the matter is what they're trying to do is throw it away, throw it out.
Yeah, well, that is the goal here. And even though this started out as a bluff, right now it looks like the train has left the station. Also in the Politico piece, it was reported that the Democrats in the state legislature had no clue what the California congressional delegation was drawing up, that they weren't consulted, they did not participate in the process, they had no input at all at what the districts would look like, and it wasn't until the very end when the president pro tem of the Senate and the Speaker of the Assembly decided that they wanted districts for themselves that they made demands from the the Democratic congressional delegation to throw that in order to secure their support. What do you make of the fact that members of the legislature told Politico they would learn about these lines and they would learn about these maps from Gavin's appearances on podcasts, and they weren't even included?
Well, under our current Constitution, none of those members are allowed to even adjust a map. And so right now, I find it interesting here in Sacramento that it just passed, authored by the legislature, but there's not one individual in the legislature that will admit that they adjust those maps at all. As you mentioned, John, there's a few stories out there, one being the pro tem that said, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to draw the maps for ourselves. Exactly the reason why the Nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission came to fruition in the first place, because people they fundamentally want the power of the people. They fundamentally don't want politicians picking their constituents. They'd rather have citizens picking their representatives. And so my also understanding was the DCCC wanted these maps out in public because they didn't trust the state legislatures not to draw them out of a district and draw a district for themselves.
Yeah, this is a lot of sausage making going on up there. And I'll tell you what this is doing, and if this is the new model, if this is what we're going to do in California, and this is what we're going to do in other states, if it's a blue state, there's no career for a Republican in a blue state anymore, because they will just draw you out and they will make it so that you have no place to go and no offices to run for. I guess the opposite is true. If you're a Democrat in Texas, there's no future for you in politics because there are no districts for you to run in. Now, where this is dangerous for politicians right now, for Democratic politicians in California, is if you're going to move those lines around and you're going to give everyone new constituents and new cities and new counties to represent, then things like constituent services, or if you secured money for a bridge or a hospital or whatever, that's less important now because you secured those things or you provided those services for people who can no longer vote for you. Now what you're getting is you're getting people who are having to introduce themselves to new voters and new constituents in districts that are totally lopsided. I could envision a scenario where if constituent services no longer matter and public infrastructure no longer matters and all of those things are just thrown out, what's to stop, let's say, a Jasmine Crockett from picking up in Texas and moving to California and running in one of these new districts? She'll have the money. She'll have the name ID. It doesn't matter that she's never appeared on the ballot before because neither has the incumbent. What's to stop something like that from happening?
Well, and also, John, these elections will be predetermined. we have so many competitive races right now because of nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission. And I believe competition breeds success. If you have to really work hard in your district, as you said, go in and fight for your communities, fight for every vote. I think that's good for our democracy. But what will end up happening is you'll have predetermined elections, and it'll be safe. And therefore, people, when they go home, they'll go home. They won't work their community. They won't fight for their votes, and it'll be a predetermined election. And having no competition is not good for Democrats, independents, or Republicans. I actually think what we should do is do this nonpartisan, commission that we have here in California and model it around the nation. Because if you look at some of these other states, Illinois being an example, Massachusetts, Trump got 40% of the vote, but 0% of the congressional representation. I don't think that's healthy for our democracy. And what you're going to end up having is nothing will end up working, and things will get even more divided in Congress if we have nothing but safe districts. I firmly believe that, in our lifetime, just 10 years ago, we had a swing of over 62 House seats. If every state starts following as is being reported, we'll have no competitive races whatsoever. And so we'll have a whole bunch of elected officials that are even more out of touch with the people they represent.
You represent Huntington Beach in the state legislature. They now want to take Huntington Beach and put it in a district that is based in Long Beach, where one of the hardest partisans in the California delegation, Robert Garcia, currently sits. He would then become the representative for Huntington Beach and even Newport Beach, which I think is just
Correct.
as Republican as Huntington Beach, a guy who lives in a different county, who certainly has very different values and very different ideas as to how the world should run. And they're just going to overwhelm those beach cities, those conservative beach cities in Orange County, with liberal voters from L.A. So the Orange County cities have no voice.
Correct. And that's happening all over the state of California. When you look at, for example, the census, it dramatically changed over the last 5 years. L.A. County's actually drawn less people, has less people growing in their area, but the Inland Empire has been growing. But under these maps, L.A. gains one congressional seat, the Inland Empire loses a seat. You have some districts that go from like Coronado, San Diego, around like 4 districts and over to Palm Springs. You have some that go from the Oregon border and then dip down to Marin and San Francisco. People who are going to have a representative that live 250, 300 miles away from you. And that's not healthy for our democracy, and that's not healthy for California. And, it's something that I believe once the people find out what this is, they'll vote no in November. But the one thing that they're trying to do is mislead the voters, saying a yes vote is keeping the nonpartisan commission, when in fact it's just throwing it out and putting the more power in the politicians to draw lines and districts for themselves so they can run in a safe district.
At one point in time, there was a portion of California that wanted to secede from the state. The state of Jefferson was what they were calling it, because they felt that Sacramento ignored them and their needs. What Newsom is doing now is taking that area, which has local representatives in Congress and in the state legislature and in other levels of government, and they want to bleed them out with voters from the Bay Area so that these conservative portions of California have no say at all in the legislature. I would imagine that if this goes through and Newsom gets what he wants, they're going to try to split away from the state of California again, and I don't blame them, because what do you have to lose at that point?
No, I don't blame them either. I've been to that part of the California. It's a beautiful part of California. It's rural living, a lot of timber mills, and they have absolutely nothing in common with the city of San Francisco. And as you mentioned, the city of San Francisco, based on the population they dip down to, will dominate that district. And so they will have virtually no representation that will represent them back in Washington and their interests, because there really is no community of interest between that part of California, Northern California, that's unbelievably rural, and the city of San Francisco. And again, it just goes to show you, they were very innovative when they drew these maps. but these maps don't keep communities together of interest. They set up counties, and again, it's just not good for California. And Gavin Newsom is doing this so he can run for president of the United States and get support among Democrats because he believes, that this is going to help his presidential race. But it'll be devastating for California if it passed in November.
Well, and it also shows you where Gavin Newsom's head is. He's mad at Texas. Fine. Take it up with them. You were elected to represent the people of California. You were elected to take care of us. And what you're doing is you're hurting us to get back at someone else where we didn't have a say in any of that. I don't get to vote in Texas. You don't get to vote in Texas. We had nothing to do with anything that went on in that state. If he's got a problem with Texas, he can take it up with them. But that's not what he's doing. He's pissed off at Texas, and he wants to punish all of us.
And he's trying to confuse the voters. And then also, we take an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of California. And Newsom and a lot of those folks just think the ends justify the means. They violated the Constitution on their 30-day public notice in terms of passing legislation. They violated because not one member of the legislature under current Constitution is allowed to draw these maps at all, and it's been reported that they did. They just violate their own rules because they do believe the ends justify the means. And again, we have nothing, as you said, we have nothing to do with Texas. And he's trying to confuse people and say, well, this has something to do with the policies in Washington. Well, what I'm saying is, if you have a problem with those policies, that's why we have a November election. Talk about those policies in the November election instead of rigging an election. Elections you should have to compete for the votes, and what he wants to do is predetermine all these elections in perpetuity. And the other thing I'll point out, John, that I'm the only one up here in Sacramento talking about, is I don't believe this is going to be temporary. Once they get the power, the politicians, they're not going to give it back. Ronald Reagan once said nothing's more permanent than a temporary program. I was here when they temporarily raised our taxes in 2012, and they promised that it would go back down. It never went back down. The Golden Gate Bridge toll was supposed to be temporary until they paid it back. I don't for 1 second believe this is going to be temporary, and neither should the audience and the people of California.
State Senator Tony Strickland, a Republican of Huntington Beach. You can follow him on X at SenStricklandCA, and you can get him online at stricklandforsenate.com. Senator Tony Strickland, thanks so much for joining us.
John, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, now that we've hit the halfway point of today's show, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether you want to do the Apple Podcasts app, the iHearts, the Spotifys. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You could do a Google on the YouTube. You could get the KABC app. You can get the KSFO app. There are so many different ways to listen to our radio stations and download all the podcasts, and these podcasts go back at least 5 years. So if for some reason you want to pretend like what it was like during the COVID days, you can do that.
I have no patience for people that don't wear masks.
In the meantime, what do you say we make a couple of listeners very happy?
Well, let's do that right now. 790 KABC welcomes the Isley Brothers with the Commodores at the Pacific Amphitheater on September 11th. Tickets are on sale now at packamp.com, but right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-790-5222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. This is a post-fair show, so these tickets do not include admission to the fair, but still, you get tickets to see the Isley Brothers and the Commodores. Tickets furnished by the Pacific Amphitheater. Good luck dialing. I'm not actually sure if I was supposed to read that part of the copy, but it wasn't clear, so I read it. I'm going to have to ask Kevin.
Let's go to Lily in Santa Clara. Lily, hello.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call. I wanted to mention what's been affecting a lot of small business owners, and I don't know if it was discussed, is the AB5 law. Was that brought up?
Okay, go ahead.
So the AB5 law was started in 2019, And basically that means that I'm a home stager. So if I have people that want to work with me a couple of days out of the week or whatever, I used to be able to just give them a 1099 at the end of the year. But with the AB5 law, which was, I think, started post-COVID, basically it classifies all workers as employees instead of independent contractors. So it's supposed to benefit the Lyft drivers and Uber drivers, but then they realized it was affecting the trucking companies, the independent truckers, real estate agents, everybody. And so small business owners like myself now have to have people classified as employees, which means we have to go through a payroll process. I have to pay payroll taxes, workers' comp. Some payroll companies will charge $1,500 to have like an HR consultant to make sure that you're complying with all the laws that are changing in California. So as a small business owner, it was just me, myself, and I as a home stager, and anybody that wanted to work with me. They're usually, flexible hours if we didn't have a job the next day, because we're pretty much guaranteed business if the real estate market is good. We may have a house that we're going to work on tomorrow, and if it's canceled, then people just go home. We don't work. But this really kind of puts us in a hole, because now we have to have them as employees. We have to provide sick leave as well. So it has kind of caused some issues with us. I did send out a form to the EDD department 2 years ago, and they just called me last week to go over my questions, because I wanted to make sure if my assistant would be considered an employee or independent contractor. They said they were backlogged, and they were going to be doing this audit, and they'll get back to me after they went through all my questions or my answers. But at this point, I've already been into it for 2 years, and I've already been paying all these payroll taxes and workers' comp. If they say, okay, now she could be an independent contractor, I don't know. They're still going to evaluate it, but still kind of stuck with having people as employees.
Yeah,
So
when they wrote the law was meant to benefit the unions, and unions are very prominent in certain industries, and they wanted to unionize Lyft and Uber and the ride-sharing industry, and that's what they had in mind when they wrote this. I'm sure they didn't think it through, and they never anticipated how much damage they would do to other industries, but they also didn't particularly care. That's not their problem to worry about. That's yours. And from their point of view, they're perfectly happy to let you figure it out. And that's the problem with the state of California. When one side gets everything they want and they don't have to think it through, you end up with a lot of bad laws that just destroy businesses and destroy entire industries, and no one seems to care. Well, at some point they will care. Because at a certain point, when these small businesses that employ a lot of people, or used to employ a lot of people, or let's just say throw business their way, when they just go away because it becomes more trouble than what it's worth, then the unemployment rate is going to shoot through the roof. And then Sacramento is going to say, wait a minute, what happened to all of these tax dollars that we depend on that we can then turn around and give to the public employee unions? At a certain point, when you get all of what you want, it will ultimately end up biting you in the keister, because what they're doing is they're eating ice cream for breakfast every day. And it's fun to eat ice cream for breakfast, but at a certain point, you're going to be overweight, your cholesterol is going to be a problem, your blood pressure is going to be a problem, you're not eating other foods that your body needs to be healthy, all of those sorts of things. And this is what we're dealing with in California. And that law that you cited, or that initiative that you cited, was a perfect example. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it. Now, one of the other issues that's tough for business owners and homeowners in California is the high cost of energy. Last week, we had a heat wave that rolled through the state that caused people to crank up the AC. They caused people to do it in their own homes, and it caused businesses to do it, because if everyone's sweating in your shop, no one's going to shop there. Well, Randy, right now, many of these homeowners and business owners are seeing the bills.
In fact, one restaurant in Fresno made national headlines last year when his PG&E bill was over $21,000 in a month because he had to run the AC constantly because it gets hot in the Central Valley. Well, after spending a whole bunch of money on more efficient air conditioning units, this year his bill was only $18,000.
Wow, it sounds like he's got a bargain.
For more, here is CBS 47 in Fresno.
Last July, Yosemite Falls Cafe owner Manny Perales was hit with a $21,000 PG&E bill. And even with a mild July this year, his bill was still over $18,000. And with this heat wave, he's worried for what's to come.
Well, someone's got to pay Patty Poppy's salary.
She makes a fortune.
With these triple digits, who knows what's going to happen.
Manny Perales, owner of Yosemite Falls Cafe, is still shaking his head in disbelief over last July's bill.
It took a year to get over that, because you break down your bill because they allow you to spread it over so many months.
To try to get costs under control, he invested $50,000 to replace his 25-ton AC unit with these smaller units.
Oh, no. This math isn't adding up at all. He spent $50,000 to save $3,000.
Whenever the state of California says, here's what we want to do. We want you to front the money on something that costs a fortune, and you're going to make it up over the long term, that's never going to happen.
$50,000 to replace his 25-ton AC unit with these smaller units.
They're really efficient.
Thanks to a cooler summer, he saw some savings this July.
So also, it's hard to compare the years because it wasn't as hot in the Central Valley this year as it was last year.
Just wait until next year.
Dropped it by about $3,000, but still, it's $18,000 still for this last month.
It's just the latest jaw drop.
Is it hard to just say, hey, PG&E is ripping me off? It's not like the state cares, but at least it's fun to say.
People are afraid of them.
Well, they've killed people. Don't even need to see allegedly there.
Oh, no. They were found criminally responsible.
It's just the latest jaw-dropping expense he's having to tackle, including rising property taxes and insurance costs.
Oh, yeah, there's that, too.
Can't forget about that.
Probably 3 times what it used to be 5 years ago. It's just, imagine if it was $30,000 a year, now it's $90,000 a year.
Those costs are part of the reason he's recently shuttered 2 locations and now has only 2 remaining. Now with the sweltering heat returning, he doesn't know what's going to happen.
I'm shaking in my boots.
Prowess says he's looked into solar, getting estimates for $1 million to power this restaurant.
We can't afford it. I would love to have solar, but...
Not only that, but guess who manipulated the CPUC into taking away all the incentives for solar in California? That's right, PG&E.
That's right. It's just like when they told everyone to buy the electric vehicles because you'd save so much money. Well, when Sacramento noticed that they were losing out on all those gas taxes, they would find ways to nail you.
$1 million.
PG&E can't comment on specific customer bills, but their spokesperson tells me they want to make sure customers are on the right rate plan.
We found that many...
What, there's a plan where all of a sudden this electricity is cheaper?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the bills are getting any cheaper.
They want to make sure customers are on the right rate plan.
We found that many both residential and business customers might not be on the most preferential rate plan for them. We can look into their rate plan for them and make sure that they're on the lowest cost rate.
Brown says if he doesn't get this location on Blackstone efficient, he'll have to close it too. Reporting here in Fresno, Ben Morris, KC24, local news that matters.
Imagine being a restaurateur and you have to close locations because the electric bills are too high.
It's one thing if you're operating a warehouse or something like that, but if you're operating a restaurant, it has to be comfortable for people. If it's not comfortable, people won't eat there.
So that's what's going on in Fresno right now. This guy spent $50,000 to improve the efficiency of his air conditioning, and his PG&E bill only went down $3,000 in the month of July.
But first, we told you that the state of California is angering a lot of solar owners. We know that solar owners believe that by fronting a bunch of money, they would be able to make it up over the long term by having extremely reduced energy costs. Well, they right now are furious with the big utilities, starting with PG&E and Southern California Edison.
And those solar owners took the California Public Utilities Commission to court over what they say was an illegal rule change that allowed PG&E and SoCal Edison to screw over solar rooftop owners. For more on this, here is CBS 8 in San Diego.
Currently, California solar owners only receive credits for about 20% of the extra energy they send back to the grid. But now courts must decide if the California Public Utilities Commission followed state law when making that ruling.
Of course they didn't.
No. That commission, which exists to regulate those companies, in theory, really exists to protect them.
The appointees that are put on that board by Gavin Newsom are all former executives of PG&E and SoCal Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric. So whose best interest do you think they have?
And take a fresh look at how they interpret laws. Called net energy metering, or NEM, utilities once paid solar customers the retail rate for their extra energy.
And that was still a good deal for the energy companies because it's still cheaper to get that energy from rooftop solar than it is to get it from other sources.
But because they start so many fires and they have to pay out so many lawsuits, they have to find nickels anywhere they can.
Called net energy metering, or NEM, utilities once paid solar customers the retail rate for their extra energy, the same price they charge when reselling it. But nearly 3 years ago, the CPUC approved NEM 3, slashing those payments by about 80%.
And you remember this year? Assemblywoman Lisa Calderon, who was also a former executive at PG&E, put forth a bill that was going to try to wipe out these incentives altogether because it's not equitable for the poor people that can't afford solar.
I think she was with Edison.
Saying it would help.
Let's look. Yeah, probably.
Saying it would help keep bills affordable while still promoting renewable energy. 3 environmental groups sued, arguing the CPUC failed to consider the full benefits of rooftop solar as required by state law. The Solar Rights Alliance.
It's like, did this state actually care about going green in the environment, or is all of that nonsense as soon as PG&E needs a rate hike?
Oh, as soon as it boils down to dollars and cents, money wins out every time.
The Solar Rights Alliance backed that lawsuit.
When the CPUC did their deliberation, the only thing they really did was they took into account the costs and the benefits to the utility.
Executive Director Dave Rosenfeld says the commission ignored benefits such as cleaner energy, climate goals, and thousands of local jobs.
Before the CPUC made their changes, it was about 60,000 solar jobs in this state. We lost 20,000 in the first year.
Yeah. This action by the CPUC a few years ago wiped out the booming solar industry. Do you know who's building more solar than California right now? Texas.
It was never about greening the state. It was always about money.
Solar jobs in this state. We lost 20,000 in the first year.
He says far fewer Californians are investing in solar because of longer payback periods.
We're tired of that. And so we're contesting the CPUC's really narrow, utility-focused point of view.
This month, a state Supreme Court justice...
You also can't trust the state anymore based on what they've been trying to do, because you buy one of these solar systems and you have it in writing that for 20 years you could make your money back by selling your power. And then in the middle of that contract, the state says, nah, never mind, we're not doing that.
No, I would never put solar at my house because I know that the state of California isn't good for it.
This month, state Supreme Court justices ordered a lower court to revisit the ruling. They did not decide if the changes were legal, leaving that to the appeals court to decide. Rosenfeld says the move has wider implications for state utility regulators.
What it means is that consumers now get their day in court. And we've also notched, I think,
I love how consumer groups have to sue the California regulator that's supposed to be the one keeping these utilities in check.
And Newsom ran on the platform of being consumer friendly.
Notched, I think, a pretty major victory over the long run for the public interest, because now the CPUC will understand going forward they may be subject to scrutiny from the courts.
It's not going to change how they operate because that's who they are. They look out for PG&E and they look out for Edison.
And don't forget, PG&E was just about as important to Gavin Newsom's political career when he was starting out as the Getty family. We've got one more hour coming up on the John Phillips Show. We're going to open up the California Crime Blotter, and boy, do we have a doozy for you today. Don't you go anywhere.